So today we're looking at a floral posy. This time we're using a raised container to lift it up off the table, and we're going to do an all-round design on the top. So rather than it being front facing, like the designs we've done over the last couple of weeks, this one it would be ideal for the centre of a table or a small coffee table. So welcome back, my name is Sharon, thanks for coming back to watch another video, and I'll give you a step-by-step tutorial on how to create this lovely design. Now we've got a container that you might have seen me use before. It's a rose gold colouring. It's a flower pot that would normally have just a plant sitting inside, and I felt that it went really well with these lilac and purple tones that I've got with me. So we'll just talk through the materials. I have the wax flower, which is going to be my transitional material. This I'll probably use last, and it will link all the other flowers together. So a transitional or a secondary flower. Then I have some round shapes. So in the Friday night talks, we've been discussing rounds, lines and transitional material. So this would be classed as a round, and it is a really unusual shade of Gerbera, so a mini gerb this week, and I'll list in the comment box below the variety name for you. Then I have a lovely carnation. This is the Goblin. I think this is green Goblin, a minty sort of colour green. And we have another transitional material. So this time it's the Hypericum and the lime green Hypericum. So going back again to the carnation, that's a round shape. So another transitional material with the green Hypericum. Then I have a really pretty lilac, a very soft coloured, it's not an Alstroemeria, Lisianthus. Now it's Valentine's week this week, so I'm a bit brain dead with the information. Really full-headed Lisianthus, a huge stem, so that's what we would refer to as a spray flower, and these would be single flowers. And then the spray material tends to be the transitional material, and you can see by that natural curve on the shape how elegant that's going to look cascaded over the edge of my container. So that's my main flowers. And this week in the studio I've got some heavily scented Freesia, one of my favourite flowers. I really do love a Freesia, and I'm thinking that we might need it. Might be a little bit of overkill if I add this into the design, but I've got Freesias just in case my design looks a bit sparse. And we've used the asparagus fern before. Now this is a dyed asparagus. I'm sure you know that doesn't grow naturally that colour, and it's a wonderful link between my container. So we've got a great rhythm and repetition within our design, great link between the colour and my container. And these are dip dyed, and they basically put them into big vats of paint and spray them until you get this wonderful colour into them. Doesn't damage the asparagus fern in any way. If anything, it makes it last a little bit longer. And I thought it would be a great lighter tone to introduce in with the flower combination. Nice soft material. Then I have the Eucalyptus. This is one of the Irish green guys who are over in Southern Ireland. This is Glaucusans, really long-lasting eucalyptus. Not such a heavily scented one, but again I've chosen this one because it has that lovely arching movement, and that would drape quite nicely over the side of my container. And then I often refer to focal leaves or a flat carmine leaf, and I'm going to use this Cordyline. So this is called Cappuccino, and you can see exactly why. It's almost coffee coloured. Again, beautiful link with my container, and I thought it would give me a really good contrast in between my flowers. And I'm probably going to roll these just in the centre of my design to help give me a more dominant section. They could of course be used on the outside to create your outline shape. On its own, it's a very good example of line material, but for me I think it's going to be a little bit heavy and a bit visually dominant to place on the outside. It's going to make the outline shape very bold and very strong, whereas this style I'd like to have something that's much softer and very floaty in its appearance. Okay, so that's my flower content. We'll just move these to one side as we work. and we start off with our flowers to create the outline shape. Now my container has some fresh floral foam, and it's about 2/3 of a block placed on its side, so the floral foam goes right to the bottom of my container, and then I just have some smaller pieces wedged in on the side to stop my foam moving about. You could of course put floral tape over the top of that to make sure it's quite secure, but this container is quite shiny and the floral tape doesn't stick to it very well, so I've decided just to use the blocks on either side to make sure it's not going to move about. And I've just shaved off a little bit of the foam there on the top to give me a more angled position to place my side pieces of foliage in. It's quite a traditional design and I have horizontal placements, so I need to have floral foam raised above my container. Okay, so we're going to start by creating my outline shape, and the width of my arrangement is on either side is going to be almost the same height as my container. So if I think about this as being my container height and I add that from the centre of my foam to the edge, I'm looking at creating that sort of size, and then my flower display is in proportion with my container. It means that my container isn't visually very dominant, and it's quite a shiny container, so we don't want it to overpower the very attractive flowers. And it means that proportionally my flowers are almost 2/3 to the container, which will be my 1/3, and that's a really good starting point in traditional flower arranging and traditional floristry. Okay, so let's start with the eucalyptus. So once we've cut the eucalyptus, we need to make sure that there's no debris there on this bottom of the stem, no excess leaves, thorns if it was roses, and I'm just going to measure it alongside my container to give me a rough idea, bearing in mind that we're almost measuring from the centre of our floral foam. So by the time I've lost that stem end into my foam, that probably gives me a really good size of foliage to start with. And what I'm going to do, and this is a really good tip if you're learning, I'm going to cut myself probably 6 pieces. So if I've got enough length in my eucalyptus, we'll cut ourselves 6 pieces as close as I can get them in length to one another, and then hopefully my design will be nice and round when I've finished. So we've got 6 that are fairly equal in length. They don't have to be identical, we don't need to measure them with a ruler. And then what I'm going to do, and this is a very basic pattern for you to follow when you're learning. When you become a little bit more competent and more confident in what you're doing, you don't have to follow this set pattern, but it's really much easier to do when you're learning. So what I've done here is, if you think about a clock, I've almost put them in the 6 o'clock position and the 12 o'clock position here. Then I'm going to go opposite and we'll do roughly 9 o'clock and roughly 3 o'clock. So we've almost split our design into 4, almost like 4 quarters. And then I'm going to go in each position. So I will need 8 pieces altogether rather than 6. And what that will do is it will give me a really clear round outline shape. Again, don't worry too much if one piece is a little bit longer than the other, but straight away by cutting them equally to start with, we get those 6 even placements of foliage to give us a good round shape. And that doesn't have to be the same foliage, that could be a variety of foliage. You can mix the colours and the textures together. It just happens to be that I have mainly eucalyptus today. And because the eucalyptus is nice and soft, it's delicately resting over the edge of my container, and it gives me a nice soft, almost country feel to the design. Now if I was to use one of these very strong visual line material in the outside, it's a little bit too long for the size of my container, but it's very rigid and very stark against that softness of the eucalyptus. And if we think about the principles and elements of design that I talked about in the Friday night talk, then you'll see that visually that's very in keeping with the softness of the eucalyptus. So for me, the overall harmony, that finished look to the design is wrong. It jars a little bit with me. I don't find that very attractive. But if I use them rolled towards the centre of the design, so if we think about a centre point and I just bring them softly in a smaller format into the centre, they don't become quite so, it's almost offensive. They're far more softer. The shape is softened, that curve is much more pleasing to the eye than that very severe line that we created if we leave the material on its own. And what I've done there is I've just brought them towards the middle. At the moment there is going to be a very stark contrast between the rolled leaves and the eucalyptus, but as I add more eucalyptus and the asparagus fern in, it will soften that overall look. So for me that is far more pleasing than placed very severely around the outside. And then what I can do with the varieties that are left is just continue adding in to enhance and create that overall round shape. And for a minute I'll just use the eucalyptus. Now what I'm aiming to do here is not to make my design any longer than the size that I created with my first placements with the eucalyptus. This one I think is a little bit long, so we'll cut that down shorter. Cutting them shorter will also aid recession. It will make your eye travel into the centre of the design. It will give more interest because you have more movement in your arrangement. And when you're working on an all-round design, I often suggest that you do what I'm doing here now and keep turning your design round as you're working. Otherwise, you unintentionally have a one-sided design. It will end up that it will look more visually heavy at the front than at the back because you aim all your materials forward as you're working. Okay, so now hopefully those larger leaves in the centre are starting to soften. They don't look quite so dominant and quite severe in the middle. And I'm going to go back around again using the asparagus. And a lovely, again, soft material. And I'm choosing the pieces of asparagus so that the curve of the fern is following the curve that I've created already with the asparagus. Then the shorter pieces of the fern that are left will look much better towards the centre. Again, let's choose one that has a nice shape to it. So again, lovely branching material. Obviously, if we put it in this angle, your eye is being sent up and away out of the floral design. So what I'm trying to do with this one is make your eye link downwards from the arrangement, almost pointed down towards the table. And again, lovely colour, brilliant texture. So we've got a light feathery fern, we've got a robust strong flat leaf there in the middle, giving me a lovely texture and a great contrast. And then the grey toned eucalyptus gives us another colour and again another texture. Now what you don't want to do in this type of design, or try to avoid in this type of design, is adding quantities of 4. Because if we have 4 pieces, very much like a compass, if you think of north, south, east and west, it gives you a very squared off design. So when you're doing something that's round, try and work with 6s or 7s, odd numbers, or numbers that will give you a more rounder finished effect. Let's just clear off some of my materials and hopefully that gives you a nice round shape. Now we haven't done a great deal yet with the height of our flower arrangement because that's going to be created with my flower material, and I'll just hold on to some extra foliage in case we need to fill in at the end. But hopefully we've got a good outline shape created, and now I can use my flowers within that outline shape to finish it off and make an interesting shape and design. Now again, you might be able to see some floral foam at this level here underneath, but we'll fill in that as we go along. I find if I put too much foliage in at this stage, it's quite hard to find some floral foam within the mass of foliage. So I like to allow myself a little bit of space for the flower material to be added. Right, okay, so let's see what we've got and what we're going to start with. Now I've picked myself 4 of the Gerbera. One of them is going to give me my centre flower, and that's almost like the centre of a wheel. If you think about that wagon wheel that I quite often talk about, this is your centre spoke, and everything is going to radiate off away from this flower here. And this is my outline flower. This is going to give me my outline shape. This isn't my focal flower and my more dominant flower. This needs to be the smaller head, and as a rough guide, you're looking for it to be almost the same length as the outline shape. That's going to come hopefully in the middle of the floral foam, and we're going to take that nice and deep into my foam, and there we are. That's my height flower, creating almost a domed effect. I think we'll just push it down a little bit more. So if you think of a line coming from the outside to the top and back over, we've got that lovely elegant dome shape forming. Okay, so now I have 3 of the Gerbera. So I'm going to equally space out these 3. So we've got 1 just in that position there. So I need now to think about where they would be equally spaced out. And this is where I'm saying not to use quantities of 4, because if we have 4, if I just use these 2 as an example, if we have 2 on this side, it almost creates a squared effect within the design. 3 is far more pleasing and gives you a more rounded effect. And you might notice in my choice of materials here, I don't have a great deal of line material, so I've chosen more rounder shapes in my forms and shapes, and that's because I'm making a domed and a round effect. So round flowers, when you're learning, make a far easier shape. It's much easier for you to work with circles when you're creating that round shape. Adding in points at the end will create a much more country and quite soft look to the design. It's not wrong to do, it's a very pleasing and very popular design. But I think when you're learning, stick to round shapes for this style of design. Learn which flower types work better in which arrangement. Right, okay, so if I look at it now from the side and I think again of that line that comes up to the top and back to the other side, I haven't brought my main flowers higher than my foliage and my top profile flower. So today, these 3 Gerbera are almost our focal flowers, and they are strengthened by the focal leaves, the flat leaf of the Cordyline. Beautiful colour combination together, they work really well. So then I'm going to go in with my next rounder flower, and that would be my carnation. And again, it's going to give me a lovely contrast alongside the Gerbera. There's an almost limey green centre, so we've got a good link in colour. And I'm going to come in between each one of the Gerbera in a nice simple sort of style. Again, they're all on the same height, so my carnations aren't higher than my Gerbera, and they're still contained within the foliage outline. So it's quite neat, almost quite prescriptive in its styling. And again, it's quite formal. We have repetition of colour, we have repetition of shapes, we have patterns within the design. So it's quite a formal shape. It certainly isn't an informal country style arrangement where there isn't a great deal of pattern within the design. Okay, so that's pretty much my focal section done and my focal flowers in position. I've tried my best to get them equally spaced out. Don't worry too much when you're learning about equal measurements, but the sort of gap between them is fairly similar, and that's good enough for me. So now I'm going to use the Hypericum and just get that out from the middle. So a lovely contrast in the shape this time. So we've got round so far, and this would be transitional material. And this will help bring the green a little bit lower into my arrangement. So I'm going to place this almost underneath the Gerbera. And again, I've angled it down slightly. And it's, again, oh, I know I keep saying it every week. At the moment when you're learning, it's almost about following patterns and creating patterns within a design. And this one, we have patterns of 3s. And it makes it really easy when you're learning flower arranging. So you'll see there that each of my Hypericum is underneath my Gerbera. So we have a more even distribution of the lime green. The lime green is quite a bright colour. It has a lot of luminosity in it. So it's probably the first colour you pick up when you look at the arrangement. So it's nice then to have a link of the green a little lower down. And the link could be created with a foliage. It doesn't necessarily have to be another flower type. Okay, so then we have my Lisianthus, this wonderful lilac. And one of the reasons that, again, that I chose the Lisianthus is because it has, or some of them have, a nice arching shape to the materials. They're not as stiff and as severe as some flowers, and these will work well on the outside of my design. Again, you could cut them all to the same size before you start if you wanted to, so that you're guaranteed to have them at a similar length. But hopefully, if you've created a good outline shape with your foliage, you just follow in by adding them a little bit shorter than your foliage. Okay, so again, try and fairly evenly distribute them. I could do with maybe looking at this. Quite often if I'm doing a round shape, what I do is I put it down on the floor. That means you can look at it from further away and you can get a better idea of how your shape is coming together and whether you're continuing that round outline. Now at the moment I've got the lighter lilac shade on the outside, but I haven't brought it towards the middle of my flower arrangement. So I now need to work that colour in through to the middle. And when we spoke about the principles and elements of design, and I encouraged you to use the smaller flowers on the outside, bringing them into the bigger flowers towards the middle, that's what I'm trying to create here now. So the smaller material I'm going to add in just with my outline flower there. So he's got something to accompany him. He always looks a little bit lost, as if he doesn't have any friends when he's standing up there on his own. And I might possibly add a little bit of eucalyptus in there as we go along as well. But to create that graduation of scale, so encouraging your eye to move towards the centre, where you move from the smaller flowers on the outside in towards the centre, I'm using the bigger flowers towards the focal area. So we've got quite a few of the bigger flowers just to bring there towards the centre. And then anything that I've got left, I can equally and evenly distribute throughout the design. And you'll see with the little buds, they're almost green in their colouring, so they link really well with my carnation. So I'm introducing a new colour with the lilac, but I also have the added ability that I have a little bit of the lime green there in the smaller buds. So I'm glad at this stage that I did think about having to use freesias in the design, because I do have quite a few gaps to fill in. So I need to think about using my freesias towards the outside so that my eye is drawn away from the floral design towards the outer edge. And then when they're more open like this, that's almost more like a rounded head, so that could quite easily fit more towards our focal point and our more dominant area. Now I'm quite aware at this stage that we have a lot of foam showing on the outside, so we'll work in these freesias where I can see a few gaps. And I'm going to use then my transitional material. So we've got the wax flower, and this has a lovely lemony scent to it. So if you haven't used the wax flower before, when you cut it, you get this wonderful perfume comes from it. And again, the softer arching branches, I'm just going to cut that in half, would be fabulous on the outer edge. They're going to cascade downwards, very much like the eucalyptus we used to create the outline shape. And I keep working around, adding in. Now something like that, which has far more colour on it, a more dominant head, that would be better towards the focal point. Otherwise, if I add that one on the outer edge, it will make your eye pick up something very heavy on the edge. And straight away you get that lovely perfume. Really wonderful to work with. Always brings happy memories of working in a flower shop when I smell the wax flower. And of course it's been a really busy week this week. It's been Valentine's week, which may be why I'm looking very tired. But it's great. A great week. We have a very busy time here in the studio, and keep working my way all the way around. So this is what we would refer to as a transitional material, and it is very, very busy, and often in the flower arrangement this is something that you would use quite sparingly. If you think about gypsophilia, it almost masks your design by placing a big cloud of white softness all the way around the arrangement, and it sometimes spoils that beautiful shape and style of arrangement that you've created. So I always think that with the transitional material, something that's very busy like the wax flower, to use it far more sparingly within the design. Now I probably still have quite a few little gaps that need filling in, so I will use the eucalyptus in just a second to make sure the gaps are filled. And hopefully by now those very dominant leaves that we had in the beginning have now softened in with all the other flower material, and they don't look visually quite so heavy. Just get rid of that. There's my rubbish, and my final placements are going to be these smaller sections of the eucalyptus, and I'm going to lower myself down just to have a look at it from this angle. And I always think if you're doing a table arrangement, you need to look at it from this position as well, because if it's on your dining table, I'm obviously standing up at the moment, but if I was sitting down and this arrangement was in front of me, this is the sort of area that I would be looking at. So that's the place that you have to ensure that your floral foam is completely covered. Otherwise you'll be looking at something less attractive. Hopefully we're almost done there with the material. We've got great shapes and forms, good contrast, good use of texture. So if you think about the principles and elements of design that I've spoken about in the Friday night talks, then we've tried to apply those to this arrangement, and I hope you've enjoyed that one. So it's been a long week this week with Valentine's Day, but we finally got to create a design. We might be a little bit late uploading it to YouTube, but back to basics revisited. Hope you've enjoyed. See you all again soon. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell if you want to be notified when we upload a new video. Please share and tell as many friends as you can to come along and learn how to create a beautiful flower design. Thanks and bye for now.